It's almost as if God lets you finally walk on your own. In the beginning, you feel like He's so close to you and taking such nurturing care of you. To God, like holding your hands for those first few months of conversion. Slowly but surely, you feel Him letting your hand go and requiring you to walk like everyone else on your own and to face the same struggles and choices that everyone else has to face. It's also natural that the initially novel, wondrous, and otherworldly would become less so with increasing familiarity. After a while, things become more routine. And while I understand all this, and it makes sense to me that my most profound prayers and spiritual encounters now occur almost exclusively when I'm alone. Most of my most profound spiritual moments now are when I'm alone rather than in a mosque. Or when I'm in my office or at home or out in the middle of nature. It's taken me a long time to come to terms with the melancholy that accompanies me to the mosque today. I had such great hopes for my daughters in this religion. The Prophet is reported to have said, peace be upon him, about his youngest daughter, Fatima is a part of me, and I a part of her. Her happiness is my happiness. Her pain is my pain. And as a father of 3 girls, I certainly can relate. While I have no sons, I believe a father always sees in his boys the quote-unquote men he hopes to lead someday. He envisions strong, independent, hard-working, trustworthy providers and does what he can to inculcate in them those qualities. And although given modern demands, the father needs to instill the same trait in his daughters, I believe he will always see in himself in relation to them as their primary worldly protector and supporter. As a father, you almost always feel that no one else is ever really right for your children. And that no one could protect them and support them like you can, especially your daughters. I had no sisters when I was growing up. I only had 4 brothers, so I knew very little about father-daughter relations before the births of my girls. But ever since they came into this world, my joy and sadness, as the saying of the Prophet, peace be upon him, goes, have been inextricably bound to theirs. In 1987, my family and I, we moved to Lawrence, Kansas. In San Francisco, my oldest daughter, Jamila, still a toddler, went with me to the mosque. As a matter of fact, she started attending the Isha prayers with me to the mosque, some of the other prayers as well, after several months after she was born. In Lawrence, Sarah, my second daughter, soon joined us. And later, my youngest daughter, Fatima, she began coming as well. They were usually the only children there, but they were regulars after Isha prayer. 3 of the most regular in attendance members of the Lawrence community. I would hold Fatima in my arms while Sarah clung to my pants and Jamila went off exploring. Jamila is the intellectual type. It was distracting, but I hoped so much the mosque would become for them the haven it was for me, and they too would come to experience its extraordinary peace, beauty, and grace. I thought with their frequenting the masjid so often, they would become at home there and come to think of it as their place of worship, not just their dad's. I also felt that this was critical to their future as Muslims in America. Unlike their counterparts in Muslim societies, there's no surrounding culture from which to absorb their religion. There's no neighboring children to share their beliefs, and no relatives nearby to reinforce the lessons of wisdom their parents impart to them. Also, unlike children in Islamic societies, mine would very rarely learn anything about their religion at school, other than common negative stereotypes of Muslims and their beliefs. Without the mosque, they would be cut off from the main artery of Islam in America. And their only effective link to the faith would be their parents. And having grown up in America, I know, in the United States in particular, I know how tenuous, how thin that link, that parental link can be. And I'm living proof of it. Early on, it looked like my plan was working. My children were eager to go with me to the evening prayer. Of course, I took them out for ice cream after. And the brothers showed the girls the utmost kindness. Not having extended family in the United States, they seemed very pleased to have adopted so many uncles from overseas. They did begin to inquire why no ladies came to the prayers, though. And this became a bigger issue for them as they grew older. They were the only females in attendance. I explained that in early Islamic history this was not the case, that women were in abundance in the masjid, and hence they had every right to be there. Yet I could see that they did not fully appreciate the significance of the ancient precedents, and it did little to relieve their growing unease. For this reason, I began to urge my wife, Raghia, to come with us to the masjid. This was not a common practice of women in her home country, and I could see she had to overcome a lot of psychological and emotional obstacles coming to the masjid every night. She would walk in there as if she was walking to the dentist's office or a major tooth extraction or a root canal. But she came to believe in its importance. Our children were much enthused and encouraged by their mother's participation, and so of course was I. Felt a little strange being the only family at the prayers, but I thought we might begin a trend. I was naive in those days. Some of the brothers were visibly uncomfortable with my wife praying behind them, but no one complained to either of us. They just looked back and made scowling looks sometimes. Except for an occasional reminder to her that there was a small room upstairs where she could pray alone. Sister, there's a prayer lady's area upstairs. While the reaction to Raghia's presence at the night prayers was subdued, it's hard to undo a lifetime of conditioning. Some disconcerted stares, a few unsettling suggestions, the ladies carrying their husband's disapproval to my wife, the wives, and the absence of any other woman were enough to dissuade and discourage her. And she eventually stopped coming with us. After that, my daughter's attendance started to drop off. They were reaching puberty now, but I doubt its main cause was my wife's reluctance to come to the mosque. The girls were growing older and their world was expanding. Public school, associated extracurricular activities, and an increasing network of friends now competed for their time and integrated them into the larger society. Naturally, they began to ask more questions that contrasted the subculture of the mosque with the surrounding one. Daddy, why is it like this in the mosque, and the greater society is like this, or in school it's like this, and in the mosque it's like this. I knew it would be not long before my daughters gave up on the mosque, sadly to say. It would not be long before they too felt the stares and caught wind of the gossip. They would soon comprehend that despite all my theoretical and objections and my ideal depictions of the way it should be, they would soon comprehend that the mosque was in actuality, in reality, for the men, and women were only grudgingly permitted there. Then came a glimmer of hope. I hope I'm not boring you with this. Then came a glimmer of hope. This only goes a few more pages. Some of the Muslim men from among the long-term residents and converts began a fundraising project. Some of the Muslim women from among the long-term residents and converts began a fundraising project to acquire a new masjid, one that would have a much larger prayer area than the small house we were using, and that would accommodate the women as well in one large prayer space. They too felt the need for a family-friendly masjid, especially since this effort mostly by homegrown Muslim women that were born in the United States, where parents and children could come together and share in the worship of God. Their dream seemed much too ambitious, too costly, and too great a departure from tradition. However, Merrill Wilson, the indefatigable and contagiously optimistic campaigner of Muslim women's causes in the United States, was living in Lawrence at that time and was among the leaders of the fundraising effort. And when Mara sees a vision, other people follow. I had known her since her conversion in Lawrence several years earlier, and when Mara sets her mind to something seemingly impossible, it starts to look a problem.